Listen to the wind. Drifting past your senses is the fuel that fires the imagination. Close your eyes and breathe deeply. Consider the element that floods into your lungs, the very same substance that long ago fanned an ancient spark, ignited by a primeval author, chiseling veiled petroglyphs across a dim cave wall. Carried on a breeze spanning eons, it was the breath that gave rise to dinosaurs, grew papyrus for paper, and dried vibrant oils brushed over canvas. It has since walked on the surface of the moon. It fondly recollects a childhood memory, violently reshapes the landscape of history, and blows away the fog surrounding the unknown. It rushes by in a heartbeat, inhaled at first, exhaled at last. One moment here, the next gone into thin air.
WAIR, Talk Radio 1313 on your AM dial, broadcasting live into thin air, from sea to shining sea, and far into the great beyond.
Broadcasting coast to coast, high atop the peak of Mount Bell, Colorado. This is the Clayton Lomax Show on Thin Air Radio 1313. Tonight's program is once again preempting our regular call-in venue to bring you another on-location installment of what we are now calling a Travelogue to Invasion, featuring our intrepid reporter, Chet Huxley. For those of you that might have missed Chet's initial report, he is continuing to follow a frightening lead that had its origins deep in the White Mountains of northern New Hampshire, a strange encounter just a few miles distant from the Indian Head Cabins and Resort. As the story goes, there is now what Chet describes as a network of obscure filling stations scattered all across the continental United States that are being clandestinely operated by a race of aliens from outer space, here with the ultimate goal of taking over the world. Chet was made privy to this insidious plot almost by accident when he stopped for petrol at a strangely isolated gas station, hidden in the shadows down a lonely gravel trail in a thick stand of trees, way off the well-traveled freeway. As Chet tells it, the station's sole attendant was an otherworldly entity that goes by the name of Earl Epsilon, and in the brief time it took to top off the tank and check under the hood, the creature confessed to Chet his dire intent to secretly rob humanity of our precious blue ball of dirt. So, now that you know every bit as much about this mystery as I do, let's turn things over to the man with his finger on the pulse of extraterrestrial life. Life that is apparently seeping quietly into the darkest corners of our home planet, Earth. Over to you, Chet. Take it away.
Thank you, Clayton, for filling our listeners in on the Odyssey so far. Now, I find myself driving into the outskirts of Point Pleasant, West Virginia. The next X marks the spot on a star map of filling stations involved in an orchestrated plot to be the new rulers of good old planet Earth. Nothing outwardly unusual now as I drive down the deserted small-town streets, past the quaint town hall, charming little diner, and a five-and-dime store, all festively decked out and decorated with garland and colorful twinkling lights for the holiday season. Pausing briefly at a four-way stop, I happened to glance down the cross street toward the nearby Ohio River and caught sight of the large, looming form of the Silver Bridge, spanning the river and marking the boundaries of the Ohio-West Virginia state line. According to my map, I wasn't headed that way to locate the next station on my trek, but rather a short distance out of town ahead, out to a place referred to by the locals as the TNT area. Strange place for a filling station, I thought, considering that dynamite and gasoline could be a dangerously explosive combination. It didn't take long to get across and then out of town proper, and I soon found myself rolling down yet another obscure dirt road, leading even further into the dark unknown. I guess dirt road is a bit of a misnomer. Snow-covered this time. For the record, I'm calling this segment of my report a Silver Bridge to Nowhere, or perhaps a pleasant little town based, for the most part, on my first impressions of the locale. That, I soon decided, was before arriving at the TNT area. Of course it was dark, never mind the fact that there was a full moon overhead. The entire landscape was unnaturally enveloped in some kind of indescribable aura, a presence that clung to the gnarled tree branches and crouched behind clumps of brown grass and reeds that poked up through ice-covered pools of stagnant, chemical-tainted water, like a predator ready to strike. Here and there, across the frozen swamp, were the abandoned, aberrant forms of TNT igloos, long-deserted storage facilities designed to camouflage ammunition in the event of aerial attack by enemy forces during the Second World War. It wasn't any of these unusual components in particular, but the accumulation of all that unnerved me. I had the distinct sense that the TNT area was elsewhere, a place devoid of influence by the natural laws of accepted reality. There was something here, all right, cold and unnameable, like a laudanum hallucination, disjointed and vague, just enough to elevate the heart rate and give rise to goosebumps. Gas pumps? No, at least not yet. As I continued driving slowly around the grounds, I spotted a peculiar landmark that was actually noted on my star map, the imposing dark outline of a large industrial building, complete with twin conical smokestacks that poked a defiant pair of fingers into the clouds and sky, blotting out the smattering of stars on the other side. The West Virginia Ordnance Works, the factory that had once been used to produce trinitrotoluene for the explosives. Feeling a sense of extreme claustrophobia closing in on all sides of me, I gunned the engine and fishtailed my Chevy Nomad in the loose snow, following the near non-existent trail as it meandered frighteningly close to the base of one of these enormous stacks. Razor-focused on the ruts that were the only evidence of my escape route, I clamped down on the wheel like a vice, eager to put the vacant factory in the safe, retreating confines of my rear-view mirror. And that, to my dismay, was when I first caught sight of the creature, framed within the oblong panorama of my rear-view mirror. Perched high on the crumbling brick parapet of the broken factory was a hulking nightmare figure, giant wings outstretched as if preparing to launch itself off the ledge in my direction. Most unnerving of all were the eyes, glowing red orbs whose gaze seemed to pierce straight through into my very soul. Somehow, I managed to look away, back to the trail that thankfully veered into a stand of dense trees, cover, I speculated, that would keep the beast at bay and prevent it from landing sprawled across the roof of my car. That said, it must have dived at me to follow nonetheless. I detected a low, rhythmic thumping coming from overhead, the definite sound of tree limbs bending and creaking beneath the air displacement of the monster's incredible flapping wingspan. It took every bit of concentration I could muster as the car slid precariously side to side, many times bringing the tires to the brink of the water's edge and nearly careening through the layer of ice and down into the polluted muck. After speeding along the narrow pathway flanked by the ice-crusted pools of foul contamination, I finally broke back out on the blacktop road with a screech of my tires and whipped the wheel around, pointing me back in what I hoped was the general direction of Point Pleasant. The road seemed to have been recently plowed, and as such, imparted just enough confidence in my driving skills for me to increase my speed as I tried desperately to flee the area. As it turns out, not quite fast enough. Sure as I'm here telling you all of this now, the giant half-man, half-moth was right behind me, easily pacing my car and kicking up twin columns of swirling snow in its wake. In absolute blind panic, I veered off yet another random side road that seemed to be leading me down in the direction of the river, down to the base of a giant support pillar to the Silver Bridge. Then, I caught sight of that nebulous point on the map that I had traveled all this way to find. 2 lone gas pumps out front of a rundown shack, all positioned beneath an imposing, saucer-shaped structure that looked as though it had been haphazardly arc-welded to the top of the support. The giant metal disc was seething with electromagnetic voltage, a charged containment system of vast, pent-up energy that was just barely being kept under control. Here and there across the pitted, metallic surface of the disc were tremendous arcs of static discharge, some of which literally crossed with a loud crack uncomfortably close overhead. Mustering every bit of courage I could, I pulled the Nomad to a stop near a Point Pleasant city limit sign and climbed out. The scene was overwhelmingly surreal. Essentially, a grounded flying saucer acting as a strange alien watchtower above the ominously veiled foot soldiers of invasion. The cryptozoological nightmare, the one that had ushered me here, was still in attendance, hovering a few yards away and acting as a sentry, barring any attempted spur-of-the-moment escape. Feeling that since I'd effectively made my bed, and so might just as well lie in it, I cautiously stalked across the street toward the shack, keeping a wary eye on Mothman all the while, in case it decided to lash out. The front facade of the station office was essentially made up of floor-to-ceiling glass panes, through which I could make out the shadowy forms of 2 men seated inside. As I drew nearer, I managed to identify one of the forms as that of the station attendant, a mousy little wisp of a man dressed in greasy gray coveralls and bearing an uncanny resemblance to Earl Epsilon, the first alien I had encountered back near the Indian Head Resort. I could tell that this one was, in fact, a different individual, as identified by a tattered monogram patch stitched to his lapel, identifying him as someone named Lyle. You'd have thought that his bizarre, ashen pallor would have unnerved me like before, but no. It was actually his companion, a black-suited corpse of an entity who I could now see was seated across a card table from Lyle, upon which rested an old checkerboard being used for a game that was currently underway. As I watched on, through the blowing snow and grime-smeared window, the man in black reached out a spindly finger toward the game board and, like a spider, tentatively nudging a captured fly, slowly pushed the checker one space ahead and then leaned back in his chair to scratch his smooth, hairless chin. For the most part shrouded beneath the wide brim of his inky black fedora, the man appeared to study the game and then wait patiently for Lyle's response, his gaze completely unreadable behind a pair of dark, tinted spectacles. Instead of making his next move, Lyle unceremoniously stood up from his folding chair and stiffly turned his head to face me. The man in black then responded in kind, briefly glancing over at me before casually snatching up a magazine on top of a stack of various periodicals that were piled up next to the door leading outside. Seemingly disinterested in my intrusion of the game, he half-heartedly skimmed through the pages of, ironically, Saga's UFO report, and then awaited some kind of outward reaction from me. Meanwhile, Lyle proceeded to twist the knob on the door and push it outwardly open on squeaking hinges.
Well now, if it isn't Chet Huxley,
he said.
Welcome to Point Pleasant, sir.
I was speechless, but that didn't seem to matter.
Lyle Cygnus is my name, and this,
he said, gesturing to the mystery man still seated inside,
is the resident checker aficionado and smartly dressed dealer of disinformation, Indrid Cold.
It's impossible to say if what happened next was a fear-induced hallucination or if it did, indeed, actually take place. Illusion or not, the sinister phantom whose name was Indrid Cold smiled, a wide, curving jack-o'-lantern rip in the pasty contours of its face, a painted-on, blood-red lipstick grimace that extended far too high across the cheekbones and refused to diminish, remaining slashed from ear to ear like a ragged knife wound lined with glittering, bone-white teeth. And that wasn't even the half of it. Out from the sleeve of Cold's flawlessly pressed black suit coat, the spider-like appendage of a hand literally detached at the wrist and levitated up and silently through the threshold of the door, to then hover motionless with cadaverous fingers outstretched.
A pleasure, Mr. Huxley.
A strange, guttural voice uttered.
What brings you to our quaint little hamlet of Point Pleasant?
Of course, I didn't shake hands, not willing to reach out and touch the disembodied phalanges for fear that they might just crawl up my arm and start wrapping me in a tangled silk web for later consumption and digestion. Feigning a shiver, I tucked my hands in the pockets of my overcoat and tried my best to make conversation. I'm, following up on a lead. I'm a freelance reporter doing a story for Thin Air Radio. The trail of said story leading me here to you fine folks. Cold's bodiless hand finally started retreating back through the threshold, though not before pausing to point an index finger against the condensation fogging the door glass and smearing a detailed likeness of Mothman there.
How is your automobile running, Mr. Huxley?
Lyle's question hung in the frigid air, unanswered, until finally I managed to force my thoughts on a reply. Cole's hand finished doodling on the window and floated back to reattach itself to the stump of his arm. Fine, I responded. Yes, it's fine. Actually, strike that. It's better than fine. My gas mileage is beyond belief. You know, I actually drove all the way here from the White Mountains of New Hampshire on a single tank of gas. How is that even possible? Lyle snapped his fingers.
Just like that.
He stated, matter-of-factly.
But then you know what they say. You can trust your car to the man from another star.
Now, that's very odd, I observed. That's exactly what Earl Epsilon said to me. I thought your slogan was something like, your destination is in our hands. Lyle shrugged.
Nomenclature is all. Just a string of words. And now that you're fully aware of our intention, using the word trust in a sentence has a much more pacifying effect than if I were to tell you that your destination is in our hands. We wouldn't want to cause a panic.
That was the point at which my reporter's instinct kicked into high gear. I glanced nervously over at Indrid Cold and then back at Lyle. You bet I know. You bet. And something else you can also bet on, I'm going to make sure that every man, woman, and child on the face of the planet is aware of your intention as well. From where I'm standing, you fellas fessed up to the wrong human being if you're trying to keep this plan a secret. Everything said here is being broadcast out over the airwaves right now via the Clayton Lomax Show on Thin Air Radio. Trust me, your dastardly plans are in the public domain now. From across the room, Cold chuckled, a strange little cackle that seemed somehow difficult for him to emit. Waving the copy of UFO Report like a banner over his head, he said,
Fringe science, Mr. Huxley. The stuff of science fiction. It's all fun and games to consider around a campfire. A wild tale to tell the children while roasting marshmallows on a stick. But then, the harsh light of day will always intervene, and the belief in flying saucers, little green creatures from Mars, or even our elusive Mothman out there, will inevitably retreat to that common sense realm of the ridiculous. Shout it from the highest mountain, if you like, Chet. They may all hear you, but none of them are really listening. Fodder to joke about around the water cooler tomorrow morning. Shout it out by all means. The more you rant, the more ridiculous the story becomes. Do all of your special bulletins and your eyewitness reports by all means. In the end, your destination is still
in, his painted-on lips all but disappearing as they curled up around his pearly white teeth. "We'll see," I stammered as I started backing away, ready to bolt across the road to my car. "You haven't taken over yet. Overconfidence might just be your downfall."
Perhaps,
The man in black conceded.
though if you wind up being the last man on Earth, I'd hate to have to say, I told you so.
With that, I took off at a dead run, not even bothering to see if the giant moth was still on duty above my escape route. Over the noisy crunching of my footfalls in the deep snow, I heard Lyle Cygnus call out,
Hey, Chet. You sure you don't want to top off the tank? It's a long haul over to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base.
as I clambered in, fired up the Nomad, and spun around on the slick pavement. It occurred to me how easy it would be to just hang it up, simply turn tail, and go home. To wait along with all you fine people as we let the planet fall. Then, with a heavy sigh, I unfurled the star map on the passenger seat next to me and slowly ran a finger across the crumpled paper, over the Silver Bridge, into Ohio, after all. Here we go again.
Chet. Hello, Chet. Damn it, we've lost him again. Well, my friends, looks like Chet still has his work cut out for him. And honestly, at this point, if he doesn't stay on the story and follow it to conclusion, what hope do we, all of us, have for survival? Well, a question for another time, I suppose. That's all the thin air we have to work with for now. Stay tuned for more outrageous tales from the mind of R.J. Lonsdale, and be sure to stay glued to your AM dial as we bring you continuing coverage of Chet Huxley's Travelogue to Invasion, from sea to shining sea, and far into the great beyond. And oh, by the way, we're hoping to get RJ and Wild Bill TikTok in the studio sometime soon to discuss episodes past, present, and most exciting of all, upcoming. Trust me, you won't want to miss it. We've been lucky enough to have Wild Bill on the show before, but to have the show's creator on as well will be a real treat. Anyway, be sure to comment and share your thoughts about the show on the Thin Air YouTube channel. And until we meet again, remember, listen to the wind. Good night, one and all, and happy holidays from the mountain for whom the bell tolls.
This broadcast of the Clayton Lomax Show on Thin Air Radio has been brought to you in part by Star Petrol. Remember, you can trust your car to the man from another star. Conveniently located in plenty of those out-of-the-way places, so you most likely won't even notice any missing time, at least not without regressive hypnosis. Star Petrol. Service that's out of this world.
Episode 24 of the Thin Air podcast anthology, You Can Trust Your Car to the Man from Another Star, A Silver Bridge to Nowhere, or A Pleasant Little Town, was written, produced, directed, narrated, and told by R.J. Lonsdale. The voices of Clayton Lomax, Chet Huxley, Indrid Cold, and Lyle Cygnus were performed by R.J. Lonsdale. Audio production for this Thin Air episode by R.J. Lonsdale of Flyby Studios. Music compositions used in this episode include Martian Cowboy by Kevin MacLeod, Good Morning Kids by Felipe Adorno Vaseo, and Dark Memories of the Past Still Linger from COAG Music, licensed under Creative Commons by Attribution 3.0. This has been an R.J. Lonsdale Flyby Studios presentation.